Licking Heights Middle School, room 116. This is it. We are talking nonfiction text. We've gone over the 5 types. We've gone over the 5 patterns of organization, the way they lay out those texts. We've also gone over the 6 types of supporting details, which will pop up all year long throughout the entire year when we talk about what type of supporting detail. And then last but certainly not least, today we're talking viewpoint, author's purpose, and tone. Let's go in alphabetical order and start with the purpose that an author would write something. Please hear me when I say this. There is not a book on the planet that exists without a reason for its being written. Period. It does not matter what the material is. If it has been written, it was written for a reason. Okay? It's no different than buildings. When you drive downtown and you see all those buildings, did they build those for no reason? No, they built them so they could have a place to do something. Same thing with stories, same thing with books, same thing with essays. They are written with a purpose in mind. Now, we as the reader have to determine what is the purpose that the author wrote this. Now, I got good news for you. Sometimes the author will come out and be like, this is why I'm writing this. Boom. That's why I'm writing it. And that's easy. It makes our job as the reader very, very easy. However, even though sometimes writers state their purpose directly, most times you must infer the meaning by paying attention to the topics as they come across repeatedly and the thoughts and attitudes and beliefs about the topic the author reveals. So think about this. As you move from 8th grade to 9th grade, all the way up to 12th grade, the ability for you to recognize the reason that the author is writing should get better. Your ability to recognize that. At the same time that your ability to recognize it is getting better, the less likely that the author, as you move through the school year, the less likely the author will just come out and say his reasons. So as you get better, it seems like the less likely they do that. So we have 4, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4 reasons, the 4 main purposes that an author would write something. The first is to inform. All they want to do is communicate. There was a volcano that erupted and the lava fell onto the city and destroyed the city. All they're trying to do is communicate. What they might do is talk about how and why volcanoes erupt, might give you a little background of the city, and ultimately what you're going to end up with is this idea that, hey, all they're trying to do is communicate to us. That's it. They're just trying to inform the public this is the case. They're not trying to persuade us to feel that volcanoes are real. They're not trying to persuade us or argue that no city should ever be built next to a volcano. That's not what they're saying at all. All they're doing is communicating this is what happened when this volcano erupted and this city was next to it. That's it. All they're trying to do is inform. So let's move forward. Here we go. Persuade. They want to argue. They want to communicate in this situation. This is a bad thing or a good thing. And they want to motivate the reader to change of action or a change of thought. So if you recall yesterday, I talked about Hondas being an auto manufacturer, and I said I took the side that they were a good one. Maybe in this case, I'm trying to persuade you to buy your next car for your teen or whatever. Hey, you should buy a Honda. So now I'm trying to persuade you. And so that's what we find when authors try to write. They either want to inform or they want to persuade. Next up, or they want to entertain, and this is what I find most enjoyable to read. And why is that? Because they want to take an amusing situation or even a person, a character, and dress it up with humorous details. And that is what I find the most enjoyable. It's nice to learn things that are new, and it's nice to be challenged in my thoughts through persuasion. But when people want to entertain, that's good. And especially when they're good at telling stories. That's when it's good. So we have inform, persuade, entertain, and the last one is just to express thoughts or feelings. And if you'll notice, When they want to write to inform, it might lend itself to narration or even informative text. If they write to persuade, it's probably going to be an argument type. If they write to entertain, it might be reflective. It could also be informative, but it might be reflective. Now, this last one, express thoughts or feeling, that's going to go right into reflection just about every time, because they're reflecting on their personal feelings or a situation or an event that occurred, and they're expressing how they felt. Well, that's all about reflection. That is all about reflection. So we have 4 main purposes for authors writing. Now, I still have an 8th grader in me. And as I mentioned earlier, I try to remember those 6 details with FOREDA, and I create this thing in my brain in which I do that. With this one, it's IP, UP, IP, IPEE. There you go. You write to inform, you write to persuade, you write to entertain, you write to express thoughts. That is my way of remembering, and I get that I'm supposed to be an adult, 42 years old, but it just works out well this way. All right? So when we go, I'm going to stop sharing just for a second. Actually, no, I'm going to switch what I was sharing. I apologize. I'm going to switch what I was sharing. So when we go in here and we look at the author's purpose, we need to write down the definition, whatever that definition was from this page right here. Then we need to go in here and write the 4 types of author's purpose. That's it. And we know where those 4 are because they're right here. And we're creating this cheat sheet in such a way that no matter what I provide, nonfiction text-wise, moving forward, you'll be able to hearken back to this, remember this, and say, no, this is what we're looking at. We're looking at an informative text that's written in chronological order, that was written to persuade, or maybe not that, maybe they were written to entertain. That is what we have going on here. So there you go. And you can go through that list just like that. So next up, we're going to talk about viewpoint. And this can be kind of difficult, but don't let it get you down. Okay? Determining the viewpoint of the author. A viewpoint is the perspective with which a writer sees a subject. I mentioned yesterday that Hondas. My viewpoint is I've experienced Hondas enough to where I feel I have a good gauge on the type of car that it is. So my viewpoint, if I were to write something, would have a perspective that it would be kind to Honda, would be nice to Honda, would be fair about Honda. So how the author feels about the topic or that he or she is writing about. It is shaped by a combination of things, and this is what shapes your viewpoint. It's what shapes my viewpoint. Our knowledge, our beliefs, and our experiences. These things shape who we are as people, and therefore it shapes how we perceive an event occurred. Very important stuff. So, as always, and this is true almost for every piece we've looked at, it could be stated, the viewpoint could come out and the author could say, this is my viewpoint on this. Or hello could be implied, which can only mean one thing. We as the reader have to infer what that means or what his or her viewpoint is. Very important. Now, when we talk viewpoint, there's sort of 2 ways to look at it. Is the viewpoint biased for or against? And I'm sure you've all heard this word bias. It means a natural inclination or for or against a particular topic. There you go. An inclination for or against a topic. Now, if I talk to you about ice cream, let's say cookies and cream, you might not be in favor of ice cream, period. So your bias is going to be against, okay? But other people, like me, who like to have bowls of cereal for breakfast, bowls of ice cream for breakfast, we might be in favor of ice cream. We might tell this story about ice cream and how great it is. That will be a bias that we have, either for or against. However, there's also another way to do it, and it's being neutral. You're neither for nor against. In last class, Miss Thompson actually laid out something very good, I felt, when it dealt with trying to communicate this idea of bias and neutrality. So let's say Javen and Madeline are in class, and Madeline makes a joke, right? Madeline makes this joke to Javen, and they get all huffing and puffing and get upset, and they start swinging on each other. Oh my goodness gracious, this is crazy. This is taking me out of control. Now, eventually they're gonna have to go down to the principal's office, and Javen's gonna have to give his side of the story, and Madeline's gonna have to give her side of the story. Can I tell you right now, even though this is not a true event with true people, can I tell you that I can guarantee that Javen was just trying to help somebody, or he was just trying to be a good student, and this is Javen talking. He's just trying to tell the principal that he was just doing a good job of just taking notes and doing all the things the teacher asked, when Madeline out of nowhere threw a chair at him. But when Madeline gets to the office, oh my, Madeline's going to talk about how she was just sitting there minding her own business, and Javen started yelling at her. Like, well, I don't understand what was going on. So in both cases, they're going to talk about how awesome they are, but how mean the other person is. And you know what you have there? You have bias coming in. However, when they pull a third student, let's say they pull Lisa, and they say, hey, Lisa, we've gotten word from Javen, we've gotten word from Madeline. Lisa, I want you, since you were in the class with them, to tell me what happened. And you know what I bet? I bet there's parts to Javen's story that are absolutely correct, and I bet there's parts to Madeline's story that they're absolutely correct. Somewhere in the middle is going to be that neutral person that says, hey, listen, I watched it unfold. This is what I saw. I'm not trying to be on either side. All I'm doing is communicating what happened. Bam, there's your neutral. That is 100% pieces of writing from a perspective that neither support nor reject any particular point of view are considered neutral. These texts take no position necessarily and merely present topics accurately without being subject to the author's bias. And this is what you want to find when you're reading. So now that you understand the reason for writing, and understand that even though there is a reason for writing, there could be bias for or against, or it could be neutral, Now we're going to move to the author's tone, and this is very important. So when you look at this, we had the author's purpose, we had the 4 types, I, P, E, E, we had that. Then we have bias writing and neutral writing. Now we're going to come down here and talk about tone. My mom and dad always used to tell me, watch your tone, boy. Like, that's what my dad always said, mind your tone, boy. Like, okay, I guess. I don't know if I have a tone, but I did have a tone. Oh, I had a tone. And what is tone? The words writers choose create a distinct tone or emotional attitude. The tone expresses the writer's attitude toward or feelings about a subject. When choosing words, writers consider both the denotation, that is the dictionary meaning, and the connotation, that's the emotional association. So if you can imagine, just for a second, if I told you my uncle passed on, that would mean my uncle died. That's all that means. And you would think, oh, that's unfortunate, Mr. Neiman, because my tone is my uncle has passed on. However, if I told you the exact same information but used different words, and by that meaning my uncle is now food for the worms, you might say to yourself, that's a little harsh, Mr. Neiman. So you might not think I like my uncle because I used a harsh way to describe his no longer being here. He's now food for the worms. Like, that's a very negative way to say that somebody has died. However, saying he's passed on is a little less subtle. So there's a tone involved. And what we mean by that is not negative or positive. Okay? When I said he's food for the worms, that's a very negative way. When I said he's passed on, that's a very positive way. And if over the time of the essay, you get the sense that he's using positive ways to say things, it's going to be a positive tone. However, on the flip side of that, if they're continually using negative terminology, negative connotation, you as the reader should pick up on that. And that will be a negative tone. And that is something that we as the reader need to be picking up on now that we're moving through 8th grade on to high school level. We should be picking that up. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to start to upload this.